I'm just going to go through all the problems on the review sheet. This is what the test is like. Absolutely all of this stuff is on that test that we're going to be taking. So the first part, we're just looking at the functions up here, which you can see. All right, so we're looking at f of x, g of x, and h of x. And then we'll just do what it says. It says the rule says we're supposed to add f and g together. Remember, this just means that there'll be a letter in your answer, and that letter will be x. This tells you which ones to use. So f is 3x plus 1, and g is 2 minus x. And we're basically just adding these two functions together. The parentheses here, I put them in parentheses to show you that they are separated, but really the parentheses don't mean anything. We're not multiplying. There's no distributive property. So you combine like terms. 3x minus x, that's 2x, and then 1 plus 2 is 3. Subtracting, please be sure to change the signs before you subtract. So g is 2 minus x, and this says minus f, which is 3x plus 1. So the first set of parentheses is fine, but the second set of parentheses, we have to change all the signs. So minus 3x minus 1. Now we're ready to just combine like terms. So a like term means they have the same variable, and that variable has the same power. So we have a negative 1x and a negative 3x. That's a negative 4x. These two are plain numbers. So we just have 2 minus 1, which is a positive 1. This is the answer. Don't go side to side. Don't add the 4x. Don't do anything to that. That's it. We're going to stop right there. So just another subtraction problem. H is x minus 2, and f, of course, we just did this one. It's a different problem, but we just used f, so we have 3x plus 1. So now we're going to have x minus 2, distribute the negative sign, or basically multiply by negative 1, so negative 3x minus 1. Now you look for the like terms. This is a plain old x, and then this is a plain old x. So 1 minus 3, that's negative 2x, and then we have the plain numbers. Negative 2 minus 1 is a negative 3. The closed dot is multiplying. Again, being consistent, just keep all this stuff in parentheses. So I don't have anything between my parentheses, so we're going to multiply. So f is 3x plus 1, and g is 2 minus x. And then you just distribute or use FOIL. So we're going to take 3x times these two. So you get 6x minus 3x squared. Then we're going to multiply everything by 1. So we get plus 2 minus x. Combining like terms, this is the only one that's an x squared, so it is all by itself. Nothing to change there. The x's, we have 6 minus 1, so that's a positive 5x. And then the plain old number, positive 2. Now with dividing, we are going to have some domain restrictions. When you divide, just set it up like a fraction. Just put one on top of the other, just exactly the way you see it here. Again, this x just means x will be in your answer. So 3x plus 1 goes on the top, 2 minus x goes on the bottom. That is the answer. If that's as far as you can get, then stop there. The domain restriction, we're not allowed to divide by 0. That's just a basic rule of math. So we take the bottom and we say, hey, the denominator is not allowed to equal 0. And then you just solve that little problem. Now, this is an equation. Even though it's a not equal, it's still the same rules as equation. So now we're going to subtract 2. Negative x cannot equal negative 2. And then either multiply or divide both sides by negative 1, and we get x cannot equal 2. That's your domain restriction. We're going to go through this one more time. Just write the fraction. 2 minus x over x minus 2. Now, because these two things are backwards, it seems like they match, but they are backwards. When you divide this, you actually get a negative 1. If that's not something you're familiar with, then just leave it 2 minus x over x minus 2. So either one. Then we're going to take the denominator and say, hey, the bottom is not allowed to equal 0. And then we just solve this little equation here, so we get x cannot equal 2. And so that's what our domain restriction is. This little story problem is nothing more than what we just did. It just has some words in it. So we're renting a car, and the car rental is 22D plus 25. And then we have a hotel room for D days is 74D. What does C plus D, or C plus H of D represent? Well, we have the cost of a hotel room and a cost of renting the car. So what's the cost of a hotel and car rental? Actually, it's the total cost for D days. Just adding them together represents how much they would cost if we added them together. Now, it says to simplify the rule, which means do the arithmetic, which is kind of what we just did up top there. So we're going to take and add these two things together. So 22D plus 25 plus 74D. These both have D, so they can be added together. This is 96D plus 25. That's it. That's the rule. For what value? So we're looking for what value of D, which means the number of days. How many days? So how many days would it cost $600? And then what's the value of D? Now days, obviously we can say 2.5 days. We could say 3 days. Generally, if you it's full days, though. If you rent a hotel or if you rent a car, they just say, hey, it's for the day. So I'm just trying to set it up here a little bit. So we're just going to set up 96D plus 25 and say that whole thing equals 600 because this is total cost and the 600 is the cost. And now we have an equation to solve. So move the 25 over. 96D is equal to 575. And then divide by the number next to the letter, the 96. This does not divide out super awesome. It's like 5.98, but it's so close to 6, we're going to call it 6, because nobody would say 5.9 days. So we'll call it 6. So what does this mean? This means that it's going to cost $600, right? That's what the 600 is, it's money, to stay in a hotel and rent a car for 6 days. Inverses. All we're going to do is switch the x and y and solve for y. Remember, this technically right here is y. All of these are. So if that helps you, then just write right on top of there. So when we switch this, we get x equals 3y minus 5. Now you're trying to get the y by itself. So leave this guy alone and move everything away from it, which means we're going to add 5. You cannot add x and 5. So leave that alone. Now we're going to divide by 3. So you can divide each thing by 3, or you can just make one giant fraction. This does not simplify. 5/3 does not simplify. And the name of this used to be f, but now we're going to call it the inverse of f of x. Let's try it again. Remember, this is y. So this will be x equals y over 7 plus 3. And again, remember, we touched this last. So that means the 3 has to go. In order to move it, we do the opposite. So now we have x minus 3 equals y over 7. Right now we're dividing by 7. So in order to get this by itself, all we'd have to do is multiply both sides by 7. This side we're going to distribute. So we get 7x minus 21. And on this side, we just have the y, but we know it's the inverse. So this is the inverse of g of x. One more time. X equals negative 2y plus 9. Don't touch this. It's the last thing we do. So we'll subtract the 9. Again, x minus 9. That's all you can do with that. Now we're going to divide everything by negative 2. So we get negative x over 2. These two make a positive, plus 9 over 2 equals, and this is the inverse of h. Composition is next. Composition, if you recall, is the open circle guy. F of g of x. First thing we want to do is h of g of 2. It won't let me erase that little mark, sorry. So we're going to start with h. H says 2 times something minus 6. And then we're going to put this in there. Now it says g of 2. So basically, we're going to put a 2 right there. Take out the x, put in the 2. You can't have it both ways. You can either have x or you can have the 2. So we have to put in the 2. So this is going to be 2 plus 4 inside there. Now, this particular problem, exactly the way it's written, you can just type it right into the calculator. Or you can do it without the calculator. So this is 2 times 6 minus 6. So 12 minus 6, 6. So when we do this without numbers, it feels very much the same. Start with F. F says something squared. Then you put G inside there. G is x plus 4. We're not looking at this anymore. We're done with that. So this is the same thing as x plus 4 times another x plus 4. So we're going to multiply this out. X squared plus 4x. Now we're going to use the 4. 4 times x is another 4x. And 4 times 4 is 16. So we get x squared plus 8x plus 16. This is just more and more of this kind of the same kind of practice. Here we're going to start with g. G says take something and add 4 to it. And this something that goes in there is the h, which is 2x minus 6. Here the parentheses aren't doing anything. We don't have to multiply or anything. So we just get 2x, add these two things together, minus 2. In number 14, we're going to start with g, again, just like we just did, which says something plus 4. But now we're going to put f in there, which is x squared. I don't know why I made parentheses so big. So this is just x squared plus 4. You cannot add that together. So it is finished. And for this final composition, h says 2 times some term minus 6. And what we put in there is the g, x plus 4. Now here we have to distribute. So we have to actually multiply everything by 2. So we get 2x plus 8 and then minus 6. So this is 2x, and then 8 minus 6 is a positive 2. And that's the answer. Transformations. Quick little review. If there's a negative out front of the absolute value bars, this is a reflect. If there's a number out in front of that, if it's a big number, this is called A. If A is greater than 1, it's going to be a vertical stretch. So you see a number like 2. Don't look at the negative. The negative is separate. You see a 2, a 3, something like that. Now if you see that A is less than 1, like 1/2, then this is going to be a vertical shrink. So big, stretch, small, shrink. Then we have the absolute value bars. And it's either going to be plus or minus. And remember, inside is opposite. It's a trick. Inside is a trick. So minus, normally we would think negative to the left. But minus is to the right because it's opposite. And positive is to the left. Then out here we could have a plus or a minus. This is exactly what it looks like. Plus is up, minus is down. So there's my little map. So the negative sign means reflect over the x-axis. The minus 1 is right 1. And the plus 3 is up 3. So when it says describe, you will be using words, and these are the words that you'll be using. Reflect, vertical shrink or stretch, left or right, up or down. Now for the final problem on the test too, I believe, it's domain and range of a picture that you will be given, and it will be an absolute value function. Now we know, just from doing this so many times, that the domain goes with the x, and for this it just keeps getting wider and wider. So the domain goes from negative infinity to infinity. That's how you write it in interval notation. You don't use the letter x, you don't use any inequalities. Now the range are the y values. And it goes from the bottom, you can see that this is going to go up and this is going to go up. So it goes from here up. So the lowest number looks like -4, even though I just wrote all over it. -4 gets a squared off bracket because it's an actual real point on the graph. And then it goes up forever, which is to infinity.